mental game. So first we're gonna start with introductions. My name is Manama. I'm from the Kingdom of the Rising Winds in Amtgard. I've been playing for 24 years. Something about me that is helping me for this class is I'm an electrical engineer by trade, but I also do hypnotherapy and certified in Michigan and Indiana. I used to help people with weight loss, with not stop smoking, also anxiety problems, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. So this topic is something that I'm going to be talking about in this, just so you know. And then my counterpart is Nip.
Hey, I'm Nip. I'm a sword knight out of Kingdom of Crystal Groves, Virginia area. I'm super qualified.
Makes me question everything.
No. I mean, a lot of these things are like just things that everyone can utilize, and I feel like, you don't have to have a super, professional back.
I'm going to talk about some systems and some things that like definitions and things like that will help you guys a lot, because a lot of this is divesting your emotional state when you're doing tournaments especially, or like any type of high stress situations while you're fighting, and realizing that some of these emotional responses you're having are because of things that are in your control, things that you can change in the future. Not everything that you feel in the moment as far as anger, disappointment, sadness, all those types of things can be changed. And we're gonna talk about that really in depth. So the goal of this is if your brain can analyze this more and recognize these patterns in yourself, that you can then help to change these things. So we're gonna start by defining some of the problems that people have in tournaments and these situations. And one of the first things we have is do or die situations. So do or die situations are the ones that you are in the top 8, right? It's the finals, possibly. Yeah. And you're like, it's 1-on-1 and this is the fight. Like you have to win this fight if you're gonna win, right? Those types of situations often can provide a lot of mental strain, right? And a lot of mental capacity can actually hinder your performance in that moment, because you're like, I have to play conservative possibly, or I have to do something different. Those are types of things that you think about in the moment, or who knows what those thoughts are, but those thoughts are kind of intrusive, right? You're performing up to a certain point up to this point, and then suddenly it's different because you're in the finals. And so really the idea here is that shouldn't be the case. You should actually learn to overcome those types of things. And then
just kind of to point off that kind of really flows with people who are on like the path to warlord, especially maybe it's like your final fight for your final, loop in the, I almost say order, I almost said belt loop. We're at a Boy Scout camp out, so I just kind of, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of people can really relate to that, because I know when it comes down to that final fight, and maybe you just need to win one more fight so you can get the rest of the points, your level of skill might really suffer because you don't do certain options or act the same way because you might be afraid of what might happen.
Yep. And then some people do the opposite. They actually get manic in that moment. They're like, I really got to win this. They go really aggressive. Yeah. And then once again, though, it's usually about doing something you don't normally do. Like when you're practicing and sparring people, right? Like you are obviously practicing certain shots. You're practicing the way that you approach fights, the way you analyze fights, the way you come across them. But if you get into situations like this, where you're like stressed out a little bit, and you start thinking about, well, I got to change things up. Yes, changing things up can be good, but you have to realize where that's coming from. Are you changing things up because you're your opponent, or are you changing it just because of how you feel about the fight? And so it's very important to practice basically fighting like you're in a tournament. And we're gonna go over that more stuff. Like I said, right now we're just defining what the problems are. Getting tilted. Tilting, for people that don't know the term, is a gaming term, but it's basically getting angry at situations that are kind of almost out of your control. Opponents sloughing or perceived sloughing, where you try to do something and like it's 1-on-1, and you're thinking you're about to get this and you just get stabbed by the newbie, and those types of situations that destroy your mental in a case. That's how they define it in Korea, right? They call it just your mental. And then those situations also obviously hinder your opponent, hinder your performance, because going to the next fight you carry that with you, right? You're thinking about that previous moment instead of what you're actually going to do next. Also, you carry it sometimes from tournament to tournament, and it's been an escalating anger problem. Every tournament you get anger and anger because the same things keep happening to you, or you start perceiving things that are minor as major.
Like when you get double-legged from a spin, it's just something that you keep with you for the rest of your life, and that you're always worried about it, happening over and over again.
It's forever going to be on the internet.
Yes. Well, sorry, man.
That's perfect, actually. And another problem is just general tournament anxiety. Like you deciding if you're going to even fight in tournament, and like how you're actually going to, like, am I just going to do one category? Am I going to do all the categories? There's expectations of yourself, right? Like how you expect to perform, right? And how you think about how you approach this, like what categories you're going to play in, or if you're going to try to win the thing. Like those are your expectations for yourself. And you also have expectations for others as well, right? Like how well will they perform against you? If this person shows up, how will I perform, right? Those are all anxiety-inducing things and things that can affect how you actually approach the tournament.
Kind of going back to expectations itself, this is just something that someone told me actually like last keep, and I feel like it's something that I've really kept with me. Something that can be really, really hard to deal with is that you could line up against someone in a tournament that you know is really, really fucking good, and in most cases probably like 99 out of 100 times, or like 98 out of 100 times they'll beat you most often, but you have to really internalize and think to yourself, it's like, it's a tournament, I only have to win, generally, I only have to win 2 fights. So if you only win 2 fights out of 100, you just got to make sure that those are the 2 fights that you're fighting, and you fight your best fight. So that's something that someone told me that I really like took with myself, and it really helps me when I'm fighting someone that I perceive as like, oh my God, like God level. It's like, no, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to get my fights right now.
Yeah, yeah, and going off that, like no one's perfect. So when it comes to even like the people who are really, really good at fighting that you perceive as really, really good fighters that you could quote never win against, there are this is a percentages game. There is randomness in how people throw shots, in the moments, what they decide to do. You guys could both decide to do something weird at the same time. There's so many different factors there that, you know, it's never unwinnable for you as a fighter because there are a lot of different things kind of like pseudo outside of your control. Obviously, your goal is to put as many things in control as you can so that you can control the fight as much as possible. But in the end, there's always a sense of randomness. So just because you failed at the thing that you're really good at one time doesn't mean that it's not going to work anymore type of thing, right? So something to keep in mind. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about, which is kind of important, is something called the God complex. So this is the technical term for it. It's the idea that your brain, and this affects people a lot differently, but your brain for the most part wants to succeed at whatever task you give it. So like you're saying, we're going to do this thing, so your brain is trying to think about how we're going to do this thing, right? And the God complex is when you have your aversion to doing things because you don't feel that you can actually accomplish it anymore. So like if you want to go do something, but your brain is like, I don't know, that's a pretty low percent chance of you actually doing that, then you decide to pull back and not even try because then you don't have a risk of failure. The God complex is that you can't fail. And this affects a lot of people a lot differently. Usually like narcissists, God complex is a huge thing for them in general. And it's where this kind of term comes from because that's how they feel about themselves, like they cannot be wrong. So they like warp how they perceive themselves and other people around them to make themselves always right. But when it comes to tournaments, right, if you already have that expectation of no success, it can be hard for you to even approach a tournament in the first place, right? And we have to overcome that because the success for tournaments is fighting in them, is doing them over and over again and getting really good at fighting, sparring people, etc. So you have to get over that complex that almost pretty much everyone has for just a little bit, and ensuring that you keep yourself in check, and that's not the reason why you're not approaching something. If it's a health problem, sure, like a physical health problem, stepping on a tournament, that makes sense. But it doesn't make any sense if you feel that, well, I'm just going to lose this tournament anyways, right? That's not the type of approach you want if you actually do want to win these tournaments. It's never going to happen then that way. So
I'm not sure if this is exactly the same thing, but a lot of times I see in higher level fighters, they won't even attempt to do a tournament if they believe that it might be beneath them, or if they believe that they have a potential of losing and they don't want to lose in something that they might think is not high enough of a level. I've found that by doing as many tournaments as possible, even if it's like a local, a duchy, something like that, it really helps build that confidence that you need to do the final performance, So if you do feel like that you want to have that extra challenge in something like that, I've fought maybe offhand. Maybe I have something in my mind where I'm like, I'm going to let the opponent throw the first shot. I don't tell them that, but like that's something that I keep in my mind before I perform. But I would urge people that are on the path to take every opportunity to be in a competitive environment. Whether that's something they perceive as like, I don't want to do that because everyone else is like a fourth order of the warrior or something. But don't like fucking push them into the dirt, but you know what I mean. Like.
So that was just going over like definitions of the problems we're going to be addressing with some solutions to help people. Do you guys have any questions about any of the problems or any clarifications or something you don't understand you want to go over? Because this is a little bit more of a technical discussion, so. Yes, in the back?
To clarify, the God complex is less of, I'm sure that it can present as a self-aggrandizement, but it's almost more of almost a paralyzing fear of failure.
Correct. Correct. So it's the idea that your brain doesn't want to be wrong, your ego doesn't want to be wrong.
Okay.
So you do not do things. Basically, an example is like if you're playing like a competitive game like League of Legends, right? And so you get to like a certain level, like your diamond level now, right? And then there's a certain level that you're like, they make it now so you decay down. But some people, before they do the decay down thing, would just stop playing because they had that fear that if they kept playing, they would get possibly other people be better than them and they would decay down, right? And they wouldn't be a diamond level anymore. It's a very similar thing to how tournaments, right? Like you're saying, like if you've already even got your warlord, sometimes warlords will do this possibly because they've got their award, they got their wins, and they stop showing up to tournaments. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that what if they fail the next one? Do they deserve it? And the answer is, well, that's not what this is about, right? That's not how you get warlord. So, but it's a
And
big.
that's not always the case. By the
Correct.
way.
It's just sometimes it happens, but it's just to give you an extreme example, basically. But even like then, if you're thinking about showing up to a Kingdom tournament and you're like, well, I'm not going to win this. You don't want to like look bad in front of other people. That is what that's kind of about. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? All right.
Solutions.
So yeah, we'll go on to some solutions. And this, I think, the first one is probably the most important thing. And this actually kind of dips into some of my specialization, which is how you talk to yourself is important. So we all have initial reactions to things. So like if everybody right now, if I told you, hey, there's cheesecake in the lodge, some of you guys are like, want to go get the cheesecake. There's an initial response, right? There's an initial response to that information because your subconscious brain basically has said, you like cheesecake, you should go get that shit right now. So the thing is that initial response came from somewhere. Our subconscious brains like to absorb information from around us and emotional responses especially. So that first time you had cheesecake, it was delicious and that is your emotional response to that taste. Food is actually a very easy way of demonstrating this because food is important to us and our brains are hardwired for taste and things like that, right? So if you think about it that way, what if you wanted to stop eating cheesecake? Like legitimately, like it's bad for you, you needed to stop it, you actually eat it all the time, you need to like lose weight, whatever the case is. How would you solve that problem? Because every single time you think, like somebody mentions it, you're like, I want cheesecake, because that's your first initial response. That initial response is not part of you. That's the biggest thing to take away from this. A lot of those initial responses are because of past things that you've experienced, and then this is now the like initial behavior that your kind of subconscious mind has said, hey, you should go do this thing because this was great in the past. If you consistently stop yourself from doing it and talk to yourself in a manner like, hey, I'm not supposed to eat cheesecake right now. I'm not supposed to eat this at all actually anymore. Like say you're allergic to it, some stuff in it, right? Like eventually your subconscious mind will calm down and start reverting to the initial response being, I can't even have that.
Yeah.
Right? So that's actually like one of the first ways of actually like changing habits. When I talk about changing habits, like, you know, I told you like I used to do stop smoking for people and weight loss. This is one of the first things is how you talk to yourself. So when you get a bad beat in a tournament, when you lose a tournament, when you get like, say, think someone cheated for you, how you talk to yourself in that moment, because you're at high energy and high like emotions, your subconscious will latch onto that information very easily. So, but you can change it just by talking to yourself and saying, like not even out loud, it can just be loud in your mind, like, no, that's not how this is gonna work, I'm gonna do better next time. Or, you know, like yeah, it happened this time, I'm good, let's think about the next fight. If you repeat those mantras while you're doing these things, during these high emotion states, your subconscious will latch into that and you're building good habits now, even in the moment. Now, this is for future. And obviously at first, it's gonna be hard. Like just when you're trying to change eating habits, changing habits for stuff like this, especially things that cause you anxiety, are hard to change. But by consistently talking to yourself in a more positive manner, in a more constructive manner, is the first step to really stopping a lot of those thoughts.
That's something else that I wanted to cover, like as well, is sometimes if I'm having a really hard day while I'm fighting, I'm getting absolutely crushed by some certain warlords or some really good people. It's really hard to not just be like, oh man, you suck, or like even verbalize it unintentionally out loud. But it kind of like, if you keep saying it out loud to yourself, to others, it kind of just builds and festers inside you. So like, I try to avoid doing that as well. But it's also a positive thing too. Like for instance, during the tournament at Keep last year, like when you get a win, it's like, I would just sit there and I'd be like, just two more kills, and I won this category. So it's just something that like really builds you up and builds your self-confidence like in the moment. You're like, let me breathe. I just gotta stab that dude one more fucking time. Oh, sorry, I probably shouldn't say it. But
yeah, that's really good examples.
Yeah.
So that is like the first thing that I would take. If you're going to take away anything from this class, I would highly recommend practicing this. There's a lot of things you can find online when it relates to this type of topic for how you talk to yourself. A lot of this information I've taken obviously from like things I've read, and as well as some really good videos I've watched on like how a lot of this actually applies to Olympic people as well. So the people who go to the Olympics, they have mental coaches. It's actually like a very common thing for them to do. And this is a lot of the stuff that they do to keep themselves in a strong mental state. Talk about do or die situations, right?
Yeah.
The amount of training they had to do, the amount of stuff they had to do to get to that one moment, and imagine failing in that moment and then never running again because it was such a horrible experience. But a lot of those people that happens to, they come back the next 4 years.
Every country shoots you.
Like how do you recover from that, right? Like the person that misstarts the 100-meter race and then doesn't finish, right? But that's how they do it, is they have people helping them too, because sometimes it is hard to do by yourself, but they just are there to remind them of how they talk to themselves. There will be a next time. And that kind of leads into my next thing, is talking about there will always be another tournament, right? You guys have ways of fighting, and you're always going to be able to fight in something else. So even if you do fail in the moment, this is practice for the next one. And that is how pretty much everyone that's gotten their Warlord has done, because you will keep going, you will lose, and you will also win. Talk about the whole, like, the Master is the one that's failed more than the Apprentice has ever tried, type of thing. So, and just practicing, considering even the tournaments that are high stakes for you, is still just a practice tournament for the next one if you do not succeed at it. And that's a really good way of taking this out that next time, and you think about all the constructive ways of doing with that. Anyway,
I'm trying to look at the notes.
Yeah, no. Basically, you want to build a mindset where you visually you want to win, but you also want to have fun too, because this game is about fun. And if you make things fun, that emotional state is a much healthier emotional state than anger or anxiety or anything else you can have.
And positivity.
Yeah, and positivity.
That's right, Spicy. Positivity.
Positivity, man.
I got like 6 Jovials.
All right, do you want to talk about
Which one,
the
dude?
pre-tournament prep? Yeah.
Pre-tournament?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about like my pre-tournament prep, things that I do to make myself feel, more in the mindset for tournaments. I put this under the category of like food and health. Like the night before, I like to eat something mild and something small. I don't want fucking to be going out eating Taco Bell and getting the Diablo burrito or something like that and be blowing, never mind. But that's happened so many times where like, because I already have like a queasy stomach, maybe a lot of people, like a lot of us do, and with stress and with anxiety, when you get into those moments, I get like the bubble guts. So like, especially like 10 minutes before the tournament, and then you gotta like run off and find something somewhere. So personally, I just like to eat something really like mild and low key like the night before and even leading up to it. Some people don't even like to eat, like their ritual is like they don't even like to eat the day of the tournament until after. It's kind of like something they do, or they might get sick. One thing that's really helped with my mental game is working out. I mean, but it's something that like I've started to do more often, where now I'll go to the gym, or I go for a run, or just do whatever physical activity you like doing. I guess you could LARP 3 days a week or something like that. But you got to stay at what you feel your current peak will be, and also the week before maybe like taper off. Like don't be going your hardest. Don't like, oh, I'm just gonna go lift as heavy as I can like 2 days before the tournament, because you won't be at your peak when you get there. But you want to stay at a moderate level of like cardio and strength training and speed.
The next thing I want to talk about is kind of like what he was talking about too. Like these are all like pre-tournament prep stuff.
Oh, rituals. Okay.
Yeah. So is anyone here not familiar with Pavlov's bell experiment? Like not familiar with it.
We might as well just...
So Pavlov's bell experiment was talking about conditioning. So the most famous experiment he did was where he had a dog and he would ring a bell to tell it basically that food was ready, and then have the food in front of it. And then eventually you would just ring the bell and the dog would salivate because it was thinking about the food. Oh. So that's like the simplest way to explain that. So and humans are exactly the same. Like we follow the same methods. Like I told the cheesecake thing earlier, right? You guys all responded a specific way to that word. It's the same exact thing actually for rituals when it comes to pre-tournament prep. So you have a specific mindset you want to get into in your tournament, right? A focus, making plans, how you're going to fight that day, things you're going to try new in this tournament, but you've been practicing, etc. Right? Like you want to make sure that you're focusing on those things. And a lot of the times you get distracted by either like friends or like anxiety or like there's so many other things you can get distracted by. So how do you get yourself like in that zone? The Pavlov bell experiment is actually kind of has to do with this. We're going to talk about rituals, things that you do every time that you decide that you're going to specifically wear. Like it could be the gloves you could wear, it could be the garb that you're wearing. It could be even the food that you ate beforehand. It could be a lot of different things. If you do this consistently before tournaments and then you're getting yourself in the same mindset and then talk to yourself positively and all these things, what happens is every single time you do this, eventually it basically becomes a thing that just gets you in the mood and the mindset for those tournaments themselves.
Yeah, off of guard, we have a funny little note in here. Like something that I like to do for tournaments to really, I try to put on like my flyest garb for the tournament or something like that, or I'll wear like a special pair of undies that I have. I'm sure people do that. I got these like $20 Duluth undies that like don't chafe. Those are like great, by the way, not an ad. But just some other rituals. I've seen people, I don't do this myself, but I've seen people like listen to music like on the startup right before a tournament that helps with anxiety. Stretching, obviously, light exercise. Some people like will do like a lap around, the area. One that I really like to do, and I talked about this briefly in my fakes, feints, and baits class. I don't know why it was in there, but we talked about how before the tournament gets started, I like to go around to all the competition that'll be in the tournament, maybe introduce myself, and then try to get like a minute of spars in with them so I could see what their potential ability is and give them a feel for like what my ability is, but secretly being like, I can do other things, but you know what I mean? That's just something that I like to do. Sorry, you have a question?
No, I have a statement. What I like to do is chew the same flavor of gum because there's
That's actually a note we have in here.
Yeah.
It's gum.
Gum.
Yeah.
We have gum in here.
What's your flavor?
mint,
Mint. All right.
spearmint, because it's a weird one.
Can you get juicy fruit still? Is that like a thing? I remember eating that a lot from my childhood. Well, not eating it, chewing it, because that'd
They
be
have it
weird.
in like the square gum.
Oh God, really?
Okay.
All right, so these are all.
That's kind of off topic.
Yeah, it is a little bit. So those are all rituals you can do prior to the tournament. Now we talked earlier about one of the problems you have is like in the moment, getting tilted, right? Getting angry, getting frustrated. Those types of things that happen during the actual tournament. So some people, rituals are a thing that they do actually when they're fighting too. Like I know Nip actually does this because he did this almost every single time I fought him at a Hog Cup, which is
the tournament go on forever.
which something as simple as just walking away and then focusing on something specific. A lot of people like to do their shoes so they can look at their shoes and then you formulate your game plan then. And if you do that every time between rounds, especially ones that are bad beats, it lets you stop focusing on whatever just happened and be like, this is what I'm going to do this next time.
It's so good. So many people just immediately tap and go.
Yeah.
Just take a second to breathe and just think about what you're going to do next.
It can be good if you already have plans ready what you're going to do the next round and you don't have any of that anxiety. But if you're actually feeling stressed out, if you feel like make a bad call or something weird happened, that's a good time to do this like little ritual, which is basically just a way of refocusing your mind back on the tournament in the moment, because it can be broken. All these things we're talking about prepping can still be broken by some happenstances during the tournament itself. Yes.
A point to that is don't be afraid to take that moment. Some people feel rushed in tournaments and like, especially in like the brackets, the best of threes. It's princess time. You take as much time that you need to do the tournament.
Princess time. I'll remember
that. You need to
that.
go get a swig of water,
Write that
whatever, between a round, do it. Because we're trying to give your best.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things you can do. My recommendation is to not focus on your opponent or even the Reeves during that time, right? Like basically take them out of your mind and get in your own mind and think about, okay, what am I going to do next? What is my plan, etc. Okay?
This is one other thing, just back a bit. One thing that I wrote in here about sparring or practicing leading up to your tournament. Sometimes in your local fighter practices, what you can do is structure your practice around like best of threes or include rings or something, like know ahead of time like how the tournament might be structured. And also I like to wear similar clothing to what I would be fighting in. So if I'm going to be fighting in rust pants, I need to wear roost pants. You know what I mean? I shouldn't be wearing like gym shorts, unless if I guess I'm fighting in that, but I don't know. That's just small.
So just to be back up, one last thing, something I do before every tournament now, and I didn't used to, and it's amazing. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Wim Hof breathing.
What'd you say?
Wim Hof breathing. I do this religiously, like when I'm doing big armored combat tournaments, our team puts on our armor and then sits down and we go through Wim Hof. And it's maybe 10 minutes. I won't go into all of it, but it's a way of breathing where you take deep, you're basically almost going to hyperventilate, then you release all the air from your lungs and hold your breath for like a minute. And you go into this cycle, but it is, if you've never done it, one, it feels amazing by the time you're done. It
Oh, wow.
will drop your anxiety a crazy amount. Once you start moving, that anxiety slowly starts coming back,
Yeah.
but like you will get rid of a ton of anxiety. Very good to relax and calm down. I swear by it now. I wish I did it more back then. I've always been a guy who focuses on my breathing, but never did an actual breathing thing.
Yeah.
Sounds like we need to make a circle at Keep in a month. We're all just holding hands like that.
A lot of these things we're talking about too also apply to like performance and stuff like that, which is one of the reasons why this is a topic that's dear to me. I do a lot of community theater and I do a lot of performing, singing and stuff like that. And a lot of these things also help that type of stuff too, because those are also do or die situations, right? You have one chance to do the song in front of people.
Yep.
So this applies to a lot of stuff, not just tournaments. And I would really recommend taking this in other aspects of your life if you can, because it can help you to prove a lot. And we're going off of what Nip just said though about, so he was talking about setting up rings and things like that and trying to do best of threes with your sparring partners, right? To kind of set up things kind of like a tournament. And that's really what it's about, is trying to, you need to practice like you're going to fight in the tournament. And you need to fight in the tournament like you practiced. You can improvise. Improvisation is a great thing, right? And there are certain things you can do in the moment. But if you're trying to, the thing I see a lot of people do now, and what I think is holding back even people in my kingdom, is that, like, say you have an aggressive fighter, someone who likes to fight very aggressively, they like to engage in their opponent, they like to move laterally, all these things that are like super aggressive against their opponents. They get to the finals match against like the other high-end opponent, and they start pulling back. And they're now fighting completely differently. And I never see this person fight when they're sparring this way. It's just only really in the finals of this tournament. And they almost always choke. And it's one of those things, is they obviously felt the pressure in that moment, right? And they started fighting differently. You need to actually stay on your game, but for the most part, like I said, improvisation is still a good thing. And there's an improvisation class at this event that I would highly recommend, because it's always good to throw off sometimes. But don't throw off, don't change your entire tactic because you're just in the finals of the game. Because at this point, if you want to play more conservative, you need to practice playing conservatively, because you're not used to it, right? If that's the only time you do it, that's when you're practicing that playing conservatively, is during the finals of a tournament. And that's not a good thing to do. You really need to practice both ways. You need to practice for the tournament, and during the tournament, you're practicing with how we were going to spar, and you're going to take that constructive criticism you took, and then change how you spar. And if you want to take this seriously, that's what it's going to be. Like I said, it's the same thing for performers, right? Performers have to perform like they're performing in front of an audience. They don't want to do it live. And it's the same thing for fighting. The way you want to practice is how you want to fight in the tournament itself. And really, these focusing things we're talking about could help you remind yourself of those things in that moment. I need to do the same game plans that I'm thinking about. I have a game plan for this. I'm going to execute it. Oh, God. There's so much on this list. All right, we already talked about focusing exercises.
So we on have plans and execute them?
Yeah. So one of the things, it's kind of like a theme of the event in general, and is having plans and executing them. I'm sure, like, I know I talked to a lot of people about this before, and you got to have a plan going into a fight, right? And you have to execute them. One of the things is that if you're thinking about, if you're like freezing up during fights and you're like blanking because of like these anxiety things, just coming up with simple plans can help you break through that, to help you get to more advanced plans and more advanced strategizing. But you have to be able to practice that also at tournaments. You can't just do it before the tournament. So at the tournament, you practice like actually doing those same things.
Yeah, that's a really important topic to hit, because I feel like a lot of times when you're fighting, you might be thinking too much, and that sounds kind of weird, but you're like, oh, if I throw this here, he's going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to throw here, I'm going to throw shoulder, and it's like, well, maybe you should just think, I'm going to fake here and throw in reality. And this especially goes for if you've ever done Bell or Dag team tournaments, okay? You don't get that time in that game to like, oh, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to fake to the side, I'm going to step off, and then by that time, someone's pushed you over and is smacking your legs. So like, that's just a different example of a type of tournament, but like, even amp guard tournaments can kind of be like that, Where it's just like, if I sit here in front of Brett and I'm just like, oh fuck, he's gonna hit my shoulder, so I need to counter, and then he's gonna hit me because I'm fucking thinking too much. So I just need, and you gave me a really good tip today while we were fighting. You were like, just hit me. Like, just fucking, like, pose a threat. Just come here and hit me. And that really helped. So.
And one of the last things that we're going to talk about really actually before we get into like a Q&A session where you guys can ask questions about this kind of stuff, because this is a pretty deep topic, is post-fight reflection. So like after you're done with the tournament, after you're done with like a bracket, let's say, we talked earlier about how you talk to yourself, right? You can be critical of yourself. You can say you did things wrong, that's fine, but you always have to approach that with the aspect that you're learning to do something else, all right? And if you need help with like, okay, I know I did something wrong, but I don't know exactly what I did wrong, reach out to other people to help you. Like, what do you think I'm doing wrong when I did this? What did I do wrong? Like, don't feel like you're stuck with only learning from yourself. Like, we are a fighting community and we should be lifting up each other too, right? And giving, I mean, obviously this entire event is about giving advice from other people about how you're fighting. And don't feel bad about reaching out to even the other people you were just fighting, the guy you just lost to, right? These are great, really great learning moments to figure out what you're gonna do next time, because that's more important than what just happened. Because if you're always approaching that with what am I going to do next, you're always going to be able to grow and grow and grow. And even after you get the warlord, you can still continue growing. And those are the types of people that have the really good mental take on fighting, is the ones that can continue to develop themselves and continue on past the point in which they think that they've quote won it. And then those people are actually really good to get advice from too.
Going back to the warlord statement, I've found personally that like once I got the bird, once I got warlord, actually my level of skill improved drastically, because like you no longer have this huge weight on your shoulders of like, oh, I gotta win this tournament or I'm not gonna be a warlord, you know, the thing that everyone wants to be. So like, personally, like I wish it wasn't there, but it's like that big, you know, scary monster that's back there, and it will be there. But I just urge you to, like, if you are on the grind for warlord, just hold it out, and when you get it, it's gonna feel so good on the other side. When you finally get it and you finally earn it, you will get a lot better. And I urge those people that do get it to not just stop fighting. Like, don't just be like, oh, throwing in my towel, it's time for me to, you know, fucking do nothing anymore. Just keep fighting, keep doing try to remember the reason why you started fighting, why you started LARPing in the first place. You know, it wasn't necessarily to get warlord. You probably didn't even know why warlord existed. So, I don't know.
That was good. That was good. I was going to do closing statement, that's fine.
Sure.
I think we hit everything, because I know we did a little bit out of order, but.
We did. I'm trying to think. I see a bullet point. Oh, another point on the grind to warlord, or just in general, just on the grind to get better. Don't make the mistake of not taking like a week off. Like, you need that time, because realistically, if you want to be a warlord, you probably should be practicing 3 times a week. Whether that be park and 2 practice days, you need to be practicing constantly. And in that time, I've broken both my ankles, and there's been opportunities or times where I haven't taken the time off, and they're really fucking hurt now, and I have to wear braces all the time. So when you injure yourself, or to avoid injury, you need to take the ample time off. Fabian, just kidding. Sorry to put you on blast. That's my squire. Sorry.
Well, I mean, like, going off of him, so he's recovering from ACL tear. I had an ACL tear in 2008, and I had to completely do the recovery, and my fighting went up after the ACL tear. I mean, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here, but like, that is when I actually started taking fighting seriously, was after my injury. At that point, I've been playing for 10 years. So it's one of those things that this trying to concentrate on your mental health and your mental awareness and how you feel about yourself when it comes to fighting can really help you go a long way and help you continue on your path, even when it is hard and when things are happening maybe out of your control, so you can get past them, focus on the next fight, and focus on improving yourself. So if they want to takeaways from this would be, how you talk to yourself is important, right? Making sure that you actually have a positive outlook on yourself, as well as constructive criticism for yourself when things are wrong, not just I suck, because that's like the worst thing you could possibly do, because if you start telling yourself that, you're just subconscious just going to latch onto that. So you need to talk to yourself in a positive manner, and it can help for the future. and try to get ways of focusing your attention away from things that are upsetting you. If there's something that happens during a tournament, like I said, bad calls or something weird like that, make sure you have something prepared to basically, I'm going to just unfocus on this for a second, think about what I'm going to do next, and then go do it. And the last thing is that really practice for tournaments, and then use tournaments to practice for how you spar. So if it becomes a perpetuating loop back and forth where you're practicing for a tournament and then use that tournament information to help you spar better, it's just going to perpetuate itself more and more and more. And then it helps your mentally, basically it's the same thing as shots, right? When you throw a shot a lot, eventually you stop thinking about the shot, you start thinking about what you're going to do differently with that shot. And the same thing happens with tournaments and how you approach fighting and how you approach planning. The more that you do it, the more advanced planning that you can do because you're used to that same plan, and now you're going to change it up a little bit. And so it all helps itself and helps you get more and more advanced.
Off of that and building confidence, this is an obvious thing. Go out and fight different people. You don't want to get inbred fighting where you just fight the same people over and over again, and you're just really, that's what Eggman used to call it. That's what my knight would call it.
All right, well, Eggman, okay.
Sorry. Gosh, but realistically, realistically, if you fight the same people over and over again, you're only going to get good at fighting those types of people or like that style. So you need to go out and experience different things. You need to go to Beldag and get crushed by a red sword and hate your life. You need to come and fight an amp guard flail every once in a while, or you're not going to know how to fight an amp guard flail.
Yeah. I'd say along those lines, it's not even about you only getting good at fighting those people. Those people will also get very good at fighting you. And so moves that you have that are very crisp will be not crisp against them, and you can end up removing them from your game because the guys you fight all the time know how to deal with it, and it might be one of your best shots.
Oh, I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
You need to fight people.
I can't hit people with money at home.
The people I fight all the time, I fight differently than everyone else, but I need to know how I fight everyone else.
Yeah, a specific example of that I've personally experienced, like, you're absolutely right. I have a very tight local practice. The guy who basically taught me everything about how I fight, I cannot throw a sword side hit on him, ever. He will not let me, it will never land. It works when I'm not at home.
Yeah, that's
Way better. It works way better when I'm not at home. So don't get discouraged if don't get discouraged if you hear the guys at your local practice going, oh hey, it's that guy. He throws this shot, here's how you deal with it.
All right, so that was the end of our, obviously pre-done explanation of a lot of different things. I know it's a lot of things to digest. We're going to have a video of this, which is great. Part of also this that's not here is Michael Hammer of God has done this class a lot, but a little differently. He actually talks a lot more about tournaments themselves and then how you picture yourself in tournaments, and it's just a really, really good class. Now, I have the document theoretically, but I have to get it from my squire still. He basically transcribed the last recording of this, and then you guys can read it, which would be really good, I think, because it actually has a test where you evaluate yourself and how you feel about certain things of your fighting. So it's a self-evaluation test, and then it goes over your score and then what it means and like how you can actually work on different aspects of this. I would highly recommend it. As soon as I can find it, I'll post it on the SKBC event page, and as well as I'll post it on the Serious Foam Fighters, which is I would recommend. There's actually a lot of good discussion on that Facebook group as well. So hopefully you guys can see that. But for now, we're just going to do basically Q&A. So if you have a question about all the topics that we just had, want to talk about specific examples, now is the time. Yes?
So will that be the event page on Facebook or the Sword Night Boot Camp?
The page for now, if I can get them to, I think they have a YouTube that they post a lot of these videos on. I'll try to see if I can dig up the actual video. But like I said, my squire transcribed it into a physical form, and since it has a test, it's really nice to be able to see all the questions and then answer them. Oh God, so many. In the back first?
Yeah, mine's kind of weirdly two-parted. You talked about the God complex and stuff like that, so this is, I feel like, a bit of an offshoot of this. When I'll take on two modes for fighting, and both of them aren't great. One of them is I don't believe I can beat anybody, and this is bad, because then I can't fight properly. But if I take on the more aggressive mode, where I believe I can win, when I start losing, because my brain says I can win all of these, when I start losing, especially the people who I believe to be lower in skill than me, I start to get very angry.
Yep, that's a classic example of what that is, right?
Can you summarize that for the recording, please?
Yeah, so her comment was that she has two modes, and one of them is that she just believes that she can't win, and then her performance suffers. But when she goes into the other mode, which is where she believes she can win everything, when she does lose, she starts to get angry about that situation. And that is actually a classic example of that God complex causing that problem, yes.
Yeah, and I guess my thing is, I seem to bounce between those two extremes, and there doesn't seem to be a good between. Like, either I don't take things seriously and I never do amazing fighting, or I take things too seriously and I don't want to be angry. I don't like that. I don't want to create a bad experience for other people as well as myself.
What I would do is make a conscious effort the next time you're sparring people. Like, I would always take these, if you want to try to fix something like that, where you actually have a problem that plagues you all the time, my suggestion is to take it into sparring first, where you spar people like seriously. Like when you do a 1st to 10, or you're doing like a sparring with somebody like, hey, let's do a 1st to 10. Take that seriously, almost like a tournament in that moment, and practice that after every round, whether you win or lose. You have some kind of thing that you want constructive criticism about yourself, as in like, hey, I can do this differently, or like, that was actually good, I'm glad that I was able to do that. And actually practice talking to yourself like this, and then focusing on that thing. Because what happens is if you distract yourself with focusing on that instead of lose basically like you're trying to figure out like, why did I lose? Let's try to fix this. If you try to come in with that and then try to I'm sorry, I'm losing words right now, but try to focus on that itself, it can help you overcome a lot of those feelings, because you don't give yourself time to have those feelings. Instead, you're always constantly now giving yourself that critical feedback of, okay, I should do this next. Okay, let me try this differently this time. I'm gonna try that again, but I'm gonna change it up on the step further. Those are the types of things that you should practice doing that, like in a sparring scenario, and then when you start getting these tournaments and stuff like that, continue it and just keep perpetuating it. And I'm telling you right now, it will help you quite a bit. This is something that I do all the time. Is every single fight that I'm in, after I do the fight, I think about what I'm doing next, and possibly if I did something wrong, how I'm going to change it up. And sometimes you don't have time to like maybe do that right in the moment, but at least after you're done fighting, really go over like good moments, bad moments, but then how you can fix those bad moments. And if you concentrate on those, I think that will help you reach that middle ground. I would go into it with the option that I'm going to try to win these fights, and really, really try to get yourself in that middle ground this way, kind of almost through brute force. And like I said, your subconscious is the one that's causing these problems, where you have like these initial reactions, like the anger is coming from that disconnect between the two. So the best way to do it is just to basically train it to do it correctly. There's no other way, and you got to practice doing it.
Oh, just off of that, I just remembered something. Does everyone know Sponge? Mm-hmm. Some people know Sponge. He's just a really prominent. Isn't he a sword knight?
Yes,
sorry, I know he's a warlord. I just didn't know if he was a sword knight.
Oh, that's actually a good question.
He's a great guy. One thing that he told me 2 keeps ago is like he gave me the assignment like during the Hog Cup to come away with 5 things I thought I did really, really well, and 5 things I thought I did poorly. Mm-hmm. And that actually really helped, because it was a lot harder than you would think to come up with 5 specific things like that. And that's something that I would urge other people to do. He had me write them down, but you don't have to do that. Just maybe just think in your head, and you're like, oh man, I just back up every fight, I should step more laterally or something like that, I don't know, maybe I should throw high crosses, because I don't know how to throw a high cross for some reason.
I teach class.
The church.
All right, you teach me how to high cross?
Next person was over here somewhere. Was it you? Yeah, okay.
Can you speak a little bit about how you personally approach putting yourself in a mindset of having fun in a tournament, so that you lessen the jitters while at the same time keeping a competitive focus?
Yeah, so for me it's a little weird, and I'm going to explain this because all of my jitters actually came from performances. Before I got really heavy into fighting, my first 10 years, I was really into performing. I did all the Bardics, I would do the performances. Like I said, I do community theater. I was also in choir in high school, and I'm actually big about singing. Like, that's my thing. I learned guitar just so I could sing better with guitar to back it up. I don't even like guitar.
He just comes onto the battlefield with a guitar, and he's like, "Are you ready for our duel?"
So all of my jitters actually came from those. I remember like being at a Dragon Master and my leg going like this. I remember being at a Dragon Master and freaking out because I couldn't remember even the next line of the next verse. Those types of issues. And these are actually problems that are very similar to what fighters have, right? Like, what am I going to do next? And oh my God, everybody's looking at me, right? So when it came to transitioning into taking tournaments more seriously for me, I just decided to keep my mindset the same way that I approach that is, I've already been doing this for a while, because that's what happened is eventually when I started doing the performances over time, I just told myself, no, I'm going to do it again. No, I'm going to do it again. I did it bad last time. I'm just going to do it again and think about what I did wrong and try to fix that problem. And really for those, the problem I had was I wasn't practicing the songs enough. I needed to practice them more because once I practice them more, suddenly I don't have to think about the lyrics of the song anymore. It's ingrained in my brain. It's the same thing for shots, right? Or things that you do in the game. Eventually you're doing rap shots and you don't think about, I have to position myself here, I have to twitch my hip, I have to do this thing. Eventually you just do it. And then you can start thinking about other things to increase your rapport, what your plan is, everything else. Same thing happens for my performances. So the reason why I enjoy tournaments is because I already had that mindset kind of ingrained into me from the performing. So when it applies to you guys, I'm telling you right now, as long as you come with a more positive mindset of there's always another tournament, the whole how you constructively going back to yourself and just being persistent about getting in that environment and keeping yourself there, eventually you absorb that, basically that energy that's really negative when you're in there originally because you're so used to being in that situation that it actually is much, much easier for you to just be there. So, and when that starts to happen, you start to enjoy things a lot more. Like I did not enjoy singing in front of people in a judging format. I was like, I'm just going to do Bardic. I'm just going to do the Bardic where no one's judging me. They are still, but I think they're not. But the same thing happens here. Some people just want to spar and ditch because they're like, I don't want to do tournaments because they have that anxiety that they feel is going to happen to them when they're in that moment. But the more that you do it, the more it gets better. I did the calculation. I did 33 kingdom level tournaments before I got my 4 wins. So it's just that's a lot of tournaments. Yep. And really what it was is at first, I did have some of those anxieties, but then I was like, I want to enjoy this. And so I started coming more with that mindset. But the only way that you can really enjoy high stressful situations, because tournaments are high stress. I mean, you're competing against people. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing for League of Legends. There's people that get stressed the heck out playing those types of games, like online competitive games, right? And the way that they enjoy it is eventually they get rid of the stress part of it because they've been doing it so much that it's just playing the game, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when it becomes a lot of fun. So
one thing that I do, it's a lot more simple, is if I start getting really anxious, I start talking to my opponent, which is not necessarily something that everyone would like to do, but I'll just start talking to you and goofing off. I'm not trying to affect my performance, but I'm just trying to get rid of the tension, and just be like, oh, that was if they whiff or something, I'll be like, man, you almost got me right there, whoo,
I do that too, actually. Even when I'm sparring people seriously, I'll be like, oh, that was a nice shot, or oh, that was really good. Or oh, something weird happened and we both get in weird positions and one of us hits weirdly and it's just
bad.
Or just that was funny or something like that. So
Brett?
Just turns into shit ton.
So I've always had bad tournaments. I still have them that have never gone away. One thing that helps me, and it's kind of silly, but it works out, is anxiety and excitement are very close to the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm really nervous, sometimes I will force myself to smile and say, I love this guy.
How you talk to yourself.
Here's the thing that happens, because honestly, the adrenaline for excitement is the same adrenaline for fear, and it's not perfect, but it will often help me switch my head a little bit.
Okay, I'll have to try that out.
There was someone over here that, there's some people, San, go ahead.
Okay, so one of the biggest issues I go into a tournament or just fighting, a situation like Sword Night Boot Camp, this is an unknown thing for me and I am terrified of the unknown. I can't get myself over the hurdle of getting myself to do something new and getting myself outside of my comfort zone to accept that I need to learn something. Is there any specific way that you know of that I can help better that aspect of my fighting?
So you're saying that you feel like you want to keep throwing the same shots, right? You're saying that you want to keep doing the same type of fighting. You don't want to get out of that comfort zone.
Mostly the people. I don't
Oh, you don't want to fight with other people. You want to fight with the same people.
I am afraid of getting a mesh with a new personality, and is there ways that I can get better about that?
So that sometimes leans into social anxiety too, which just in general, right? I know we're a social group, and we try to invite other people to be in that open space. And sometimes I know at tournaments it can feel like a closed space, right? You have people that have been in a lot of tournaments and they're focused. You can tell when they're looking at them, they're focused on the tournament. They're trying to figure out what they want to do during this tournament, and so you feel like you can never approach them, right? And you can't talk to them. And then fighting them then feels kind of weird because it's not as fun as just sparring people that you spar all the time, right? Really, I know it sucks, but you kind of have to just do it. And I know for like someone like me, I'm an extrovert, so yeah, me saying that is like hilarious because it seems like I can talk to anyone, and that helps me a lot during these tournaments. But even if you're introverted or it's really hard for you to talk to other people, I think that we can, as a group too, agree that we need to be more inviting for people just in general to be like in that space, and realize that for the most part, especially AMP Guard tournaments, and even the Rising Winds especially, I think they're very, very opening for anyone to come and join, and people are really constructive criticism. Even the people that like, most of our warlords I know are really good at like giving people constructive criticism, talking with people, and realizing that that's the case. And you kind of like have to put yourself out there a little bit. And while you may feel that anxiety, like I said, is coming from a place of experiences in the past. The only way forward is to experience those new things, and then every single time be like, that was actually good, or like, that, like, this was actually kind of bad, but I can do better things better next time. And it's really how you talk to yourself in that moment to get your subconscious to get out of that kind of like anxiety cycle when it comes to how you approach like tournaments and stuff like that. Do you have a comment on that?
You can skip me if you want.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. We have someone over here and someone over there. You next, and then I'll go you.
Okay. So a lot of what we talked about is like controlling emotionally based responses. What if you struggle to identify that you're acting out of an emotional place? Like, especially for Do or Die, which is a lot about a sense of urgency. How do you, or am I doing the math? Am I doing analysis, or am I in that sense of urgency and I need to like take a step back?
Normally watching a video of yourself is actually really good. I know not everybody videotapes like tournaments and stuff like that. I would try to get people that are watching you fight and literally just ask them, like, did it look like I fought differently, or do you think I fought the same? Because that's what I said. It's a really thing that plagues a lot of people, like I said. And yeah, it can be hard to identify in the moment. I agree with you. A lot of these things are very subtle ways. Like, say you have a shot that you like to throw that's like your shot, right? And this person doesn't even know about that shot, but you're like, maybe it's a bit risky, so you decide just to not throw it, right? But maybe you should have, because the person literally doesn't even know this thing you're about to do. So like those are decisions, right, that you make that I would analyze later and be like, why did I not do that? Like really think about like, why did I do it this way, and why didn't I do it a different way? And then really, if you challenge yourself after a tournament, even if you think that you did it fine, really think about the shots you threw and how you approach the fight and your planning. And then I think maybe you might be able to recognize that a lot easier. But probably somebody else looking at you that knows how you fight is probably the best way if it's more subtle, like you said. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then,
Okay,
yes.
So for social anxiety, what I do is I have an affirmation. It's done, right? It's pretty good. So whenever I have to talk to someone that like I've never met before, and like I'm like, oh my god, I know that person from YouTube, and they're so amazing or whatever. I just tell myself how cool I am. So I say I'm hot, smart, talented, and everyone likes me. And then I go talk to the person. And
fuck, I gotta try that.
Hot, smart, and talented.
So we really joke about that, but that literally is proven.
Yeah, it's literally what
it's literally proven. Like we talked about, like they've done studies in the past where they have people that they tell them to say something to themselves like 3 times a day, like some kind of like affirmation that's either negative or positive, and then like then they have questions later on about their general anxiety, stress levels, and certain things. And yes, even though they don't believe that thing, they were just told to say it, they start to feel it, because they're like literally your subconscious does not differentiate sometimes between what you said, the meaning behind what you said. Sometimes all it cares about how emotionally it was done and what was said, and that's it. So literally how you talk to yourself is that important, because your brain that's in the background is always listening to how you're doing it and how you're interacting with people, because your brain wants to be safe. So if there's a stressful situation or if there's a dangerous situation, it wants to make sure you're never going to be in that situation again. It's the fight or flight stuff, but it's also like if you hear like a gunshot go off, where do you need to go, right? You recognize a gunshot, your subconscious says no, get out of here, right? It also wants to take care of your nutrition needs. That's why the food thing is like so important, and why weight loss is so hard, because it's like you need food always. And then there's also this aspect of like what makes you happy. Your brain wants to be happy, so it wants to avoid situations that make you unhappy.
Pretzel pizza at Little Caesars.
There are some problems. Sometimes there are chemical imbalance problems that can't be helped that cause it to flip, that situation to flip. But how you talk to yourself can really, really help you with that, because if you're always having these negative experiences, eventually your subconscious mind gets comfortable with being negative. Your subconscious gets comfortable with you having anxiety and says, this is normal, so this is how we're going to stay. And the only way to break those types of cycles is literally by breaking them. And it has to be your conscious mind being like, no, we're not going to do that today. And it may not fix it right now, but it will help you into the future.
And then the other thing I do is I Pavloved myself into being calm. So like whenever you're calm and happy, if you take your thumb and you squeeze it really hard, then you get in the habit of like, this is calm. And then you go into the tournament or whatever and you squeeze your thumb really hard and then you feel calm because you Pavloved yourself into being calm.
Just giving good examples.
Yeah. There was somebody, who else had questions? That's fine. Go ahead.
This isn't really a question, it's more of a comment. One of the things that you can do, you said specifically that your fear is fear of the unknown, fear of these new people. To a certain extent, you can mitigate this. Bring your people with you. I am part of a fighting company. We travel together. We go to tournaments together. I do meet new people, but I also have familiar people there with me. They're there to support me. I'm there to support them. You bring your familiar with you into the unknown, so that if you are feeling, I can't do this, I'm feeling overwhelmed, you can kind of return to a place of familiarity, of safety, recharge yourself, and then go back into the unknown, more able to face it. Similarly, if you're training regularly, if you're pelling regularly, you know what you're going to deploy into the unknown of the unknown fighters and their strategies. You know that what you're bringing to the table is known, and you're already halfway through Sun Tzu. You know yourself, you might not know your enemy, but you know what they say.
Also, Son, to like echo that too, the first step would be sparring with people outside the circle first. Like really concentrate just on sparring people and getting used to fighting new people. And afterwards, thinking about, wow, that person fought differently, and then think about how they fought. Like, how is it different than the other people you normally fight? And when you get used to analyzing that type of thing, it'll be much easier then for you to actually go into tournaments, possibly with other people that you don't know and stuff. But I would practice first, if you need a first step, would just be like choosing a group of people, even if it's at your own park that you normally don't fight, and really just engaging with them, and just in fighting them and getting used to that. And then whenever you visit, or like, you know, at an event like this, right, you're fighting a lot of different people in a ditch field. Really think about the fights you have with the people here and analyze them, and it'll help you get used to like having unknown people in front of you, and you're like, you know, because you're gonna start craving that knowledge more. Like, oh man, they threw this one shot. I wonder how they did that. You know, really think about those things. Like really like internalize them and actually think about them, and take the time to do it. Okay. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about how you deal with mentally not checking out after getting knocked out of that first category?
I have almost quit after, actually, for my 9th Order of the Warrior, I remember I got knocked out of brackets very first round in single, and I was almost ready to like throw in the towel, and I thought my life was over because my second son was about to be born, so I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get to fight again in my practice, I'm never going to practice ever again. And it really helped having family. Like my wife was there, I had some company mates there that really like centered me, and I actually came back and I won that tournament. So that's definitely something, having friends or people around you that when you can't handle that situation, that they ground you, really helps.
Like, yeah, changing focus. We talked about that earlier, right? I talked about like looking at your feet and then internalizing what you're about to do next, right? What should I do next? It's not looking and paying attention to things that are causing that anxiety. It really helps when you break your focus off of whatever it is. So having those rituals in the moment, focus rituals, like taking deep breaths is always good. I mean, taking deep breaths is always good, but like having that to be your like, okay, you know, like this, and then you're setting yourself basically and be like, okay, what am I gonna do next? And that's how you do it, is literally just take a deep breath, and then the next thought is, what am I going to do next? What am I going to focus on next? How am I going to approach this next bracket? And breaking focus is a large part of that to help with that anxiety, and then getting yourself back in the game.
Fantastic question.
Yeah, that was a good one. Anything else? Yes.
So this may be a little more of a personal question, but it's, so I've been a larger guy most of my life, so I have always tried not to be forceful, not to basically hurt people. So as I've gotten comfortable fighting my field mates and other people that I fight on the regular, I have a higher intensity that I fight with those people that I feel like I lack with people that I've never fought before because of that fear of going too hard and hurting a person that may not be ready for that intensity, or that maybe I just shouldn't be fighting at that intensity for. Is there a way to deal with that? Or
That one's a really tough one.
I mean, I deal with like various different LARPs in the area, but so do you. Or I find that to figure out the level of intensity I need to play at, I try to play it really safe first and determine that. That's really.
I have a non-PC answer.
I don't. Well, we're on.
Mostly PC.
We're on camera.
Just hit everybody the same.
I mean,
like, do your best. If it's intense, it's intense. Just be the guy.
Yes, but there is something to be said about like knowing how much intensity you should give, though. I personally feel.
If it's a tournament, I'm not gonna Bellegarde shield kick somebody.
Yeah,
that's illegal in the rules. That's not what we're talking about.
But in tournaments, though, you should fight at your top. This is just what it comes down to.
I think his question was more about in general, not necessarily tournaments, but like you go to a park day, you've never met these people before, you probably shouldn't fucking push them over if they're like
We're
if they
talking
don't
about
do it.
illegal stuff. That's not.
I know, but he's talking about Bell and Dag, so I assume that that's what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And they,
But that's
I know
the
it.
game.
I know it is.
Shut up.
I mean, I know
Spicy.
nut shots
To the
are
back
also
of the
legal
room.
in Amp Guard, but you probably shouldn't be aiming for someone's, dick and balls. Like that's just not really something that
Yeah.
That's not intensity. Again, that's not intensity.
That one's really hard to answer for us, especially since like I know like from me, my
lower it and
perspective,
up it
I've only been
depending on
playing
who
Bellard. I mean, I play Bell and Dag, but it's like a lot more infrequent.
If we're trying to work with somebody new, I'm gonna bring it down.
Is when you mean intense, I don't know exactly what I'd have to look at. I'd have to see it personally. You know what I'm saying, type of thing. For the most part, though, during tournaments,
more about like
it's pretty much like even like an amp card and stuff like that. There's a speed at which people play and a speed at which people hit, and it's really hard to go. I think for most people to go too far unless they're really like,
is like I'm always like
type of thing. Most of the shots, if you're doing them in the normal, correct way, really generate their speed and power that are not going to really affect something unless your sword's actually like broken.
It's not like that. But I don't.
That makes sense.
But I get.
But as far as what you're talking about, all you can do is calibrate yourself and then ask people, "Hey, is this too much?"
You know what I mean?
So I would maybe start off like he said. Shh, God, you guys are talking.
Sorry,
we're
having our own argument.
I would start off softer with people if you're really thinking that is a problem, and then ask them like, can we ramp it up a little bit, and then see how it goes from there. And if you have a consistency where it's maybe not actually okay, maybe most of the people you come across is okay, it's possible you can fight like that all the time. Okay? I'm sorry, it's gonna be really hard to answer.
it was a weird question anyway.
Yeah, that's all good.
No, it's good.
Yeah, we can talk about it again
That's a good
later.
question, dude.
Yes.
And everyone's different too, so it's just gonna vary.
Kind of, it's a bit of a non sequitur, but when it comes to kind of addressing the God complex, I've been given a few like recommended reading books lately, and something that seems to keep coming up in them is not adding value judgments to your losses or your victories.
Correct.
And so if you avoid defining your value based on, oh, I lost this tournament, or oh, I won this tournament, if you don't define your value based on how many tournaments you have lost and be like, oh, well, I'm a bad fighter, I'm never going to get any good, I'm always going to get chumped in the second round at best, then eventually you're just going to quit entering tournaments. But also if you assign a lot of value to your wins, it's like, oh yeah, I won single sword, I won this weapon master, I'm super great, and then you get stabbed in the dick round one by a newbie at the very next tournament you enter and you're out, you're going to feel a lot worse about yourself because you let yourself kind of build that glass castle.
Correct. I mean, that was one of the reasons why we were trying to stress, thinking about every fight, kind of like, what did you do well, what did your opponent do well, and like, what can I do for the next fight? Because if you do it that way, you're not really thinking about the win-loss, you're thinking about what you're going to try to take away from it. Like I did that, actually. I did this thing specifically well, and I did this thing maybe not so well. I should practice on how I do this thing next. And if you think about that every time and not stress on the actual wins and losses, you will eventually be winning by just doing that because you're building yourself up and then building up your rapport more actively rather than passively too. A lot of people build up passively by just fighting and then not thinking about how they just fought. Like they just do a thing and they're like, I did that thing, right? Really analyzing how you fight is how you actually improve yourself. So.
You had a comment?
It was similar, but setting goals for yourself based on things that you can achieve, not things that other people have control of.
Yep.
Right? Because like, there's a lot of different things that change in a tournament. There's a lot of different things that change with awards. Who's the monarch? Who's this? You know, there's things that change all the time. Things that you can control are the only ways that like you can measure yourself getting better.
All right, it's kind of late. I forget what the end time for this was supposed to be. Is there any other questions before we end? You have a question? Yes?
Yeah, I do have a question. So something that I've run into both personally and with a couple of other people that I've been I'm not sure if you're familiar with oppositional defiant disorder.
No.
So effectively, it is, and a lot of times it feels very out of one's control, where someone generally well-meaning. Usually the circumstance that crops up most often is you're either giving, like someone's trying to give you instruction or advice unprompted on the field.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know, your opponent, right, is like, you just got done, you got blew out. And you know, you're, a little bit in your head, and the guy's like, hey, so I did this, maybe hold your board up a little bit better. And for absolutely no reason at all, you just get mad.
Yeah.
At that guy.
That's why whenever I try to help someone, I always ask if they want to like hear anything at that point in time. Never just go out and be like, hey man, you did this wrong.
Yeah.
Like you should.
I suppose the question is, like, you guys have strategies for like dealing with that from the inside out as opposed to from the outside in.
Yeah. So this
ultimately,
I would just.
I want to get better.
Yeah.
I want to be good, but I have this thing that's like fighting that goal. In my head.
So sometimes, I mean, not everyone's going to do that thing you're talking about where they come and talk to you right after they beat you to give you advice from a perspective of malice, right?
Yeah.
I would say probably a lot of people are trying to be helpful, but it's probably not appropriate and they don't understand that. And sometimes you don't want to actually like point that out to them, or like in the moment you don't want to like have an entire conversation about why they shouldn't be doing this right now. But the best advice I have is the thing about breaking focus, right? So like being like, oh, thanks man, or like no thanks real quick, and then just walking away from them. And that's because it's a tilting moment, right? We talked about getting tilted. Those are the types of things that can tilt you out of the moment. And the best way to deal with those things is breaking your focus and then going back to the things that you do to center yourself, rituals, breathing. You know, like I said, like the big simplest one is just looking at your feet, taking a deep breath, and then thinking about what your next game plan is. What's coming, what brackets next, what matches next if it's double limb or something like that. That's the best way to deal with those situations. And when you get used to dealing with it that way, it makes it a lot easier into the future. That makes sense.
Or you can just defer it till later.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I would let that person know and be like, thank you for your concern. Can we talk about this later?
Yeah, sort of
Right, super interested.
Yeah.
Please talk to me when the tournament's over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Because then that way you're still conveying, like, I'm still interested, but right now.
You still have value, I'm not
You're holding your
devaluing.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the flip side, don't be that guy.
Yeah, don't be that guy.
Everyone gets in the way.
Always ask them first.
Oh, hey, want me to show you some cool shots?
Yeah, you're on the
All right, I want to thank you guys. Hopefully you guys brought mosquitoes. Really appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Manama.
And feel free to find either one of us if you want to talk about these issues more. We can talk about very specific things if you need to. So, thank you.